Okay, so imagine, just for a second, that you could get in on the ground floor of the next Google.
Or Amazon.
Exactly.
Like before they hit the stock market.
Right, before everybody knows about them.
Yeah.
That's the kind of potential that we're talking about with private markets.
Exactly. And it's usually off limits to most people, but
No.
that might be changing.
Yeah, that's what we're going to look at today.
Yeah.
We've got this
This article.
really interesting article from the CFA Institute, and they're arguing that private markets should be more accessible
Yeah.
to everyday investors like you or me.
To everyone.
Yeah, so this is a bold statement
Yeah, it is. It is.
from an organization like the CFA Institute.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, they're very influential.
Yeah, what I thought was so interesting
Yeah.
is they're not just advocating for wider access,
Right.
but they're also asking some really important questions about the perceived stability of
Public markets.
public markets.
Yeah.
Yeah. They point out that all of these retail investors coming into the market, fueled by platforms like Robinhood,
Right.
it hasn't exactly been a smooth ride.
No, it has not.
Yeah. They even say that this has led to more market bubbles.
Like, think
Yeah.
about
Well,
the GameStop frenzy a couple of years ago.
Oh, that's
It's a prime example
a wild ride.
of how this influx of retail investors, often driven by social media trends,
Yeah.
can really just create volatility and distortions in the market.
Yeah. I mean, the CFA Institute is arguing that public markets might not be the safe haven.
Yeah, that we all
Think they are.
think they are.
Especially with so many new investors jumping in without maybe fully understanding
Yeah.
the risks.
That brings us to private markets,
Right.
which have always been this exclusive club
Exactly.
for the wealthy.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
the accredited investor.
Yeah. And the article defines accredited investors as individuals with high net worth or income.
So they get exclusive access to these certain investments.
Right. But by excluding everybody else,
Yeah.
it's a missed opportunity
Yeah.
for individual investors and for the economy as a whole.
Exactly. And they argue that private markets, and particularly private credit, could be a powerful tool
Yes.
for diversification.
Yes.
And because private markets don't react to all the ups and downs of the stock market in the same way,
Right.
they offer this sort of different kind of stability.
Exactly.
Okay, so for our listeners who might not be super familiar with private credit,
Yeah.
can you just break down like what kind of investments
Sure.
we're actually talking about here?
So private credit refers to loans
Okay.
that are made to companies by non-bank lenders.
Okay.
So think of it as an alternative to traditional corporate bonds,
Mm-hmm.
which are traded on public exchanges.
Okay.
Private credit, it can be all sorts of things, from direct lending to distressed debt. And it often targets companies that are not large enough or established enough to access public debt markets.
I see. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the CFA Institute is basically saying by opening up private markets,
Yeah.
everyday investors could not only potentially get in on the ground floor of the next big thing,
Yeah.
but also build these more resilient portfolios
Yeah.
that aren't so vulnerable to the ups and downs of the stock market.
That's the gist of it. Yeah.
That's a great point.
But they also emphasize that education is super important.
Yes,
because
knowledge is power,
exactly.
especially when it comes to investing.
Yeah. So if we're going to make private markets more accessible, we got to make sure people understand what they're getting into.
That makes a lot of sense. So where does a platform like SteerUp fit into all of this?
Yeah.
I know they're doing some interesting things in the private market investing world.
So SteerUp is an interesting example of how the landscape is starting to shift. They're using startup crowdfunding regulations in Canada to offer private market investments with a really low minimum
Oh, wow.
of just $500
That's
to
right.
get started.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's way more accessible than what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And their model is designed to address some of these concerns that the CFA Institute raises about investor experience.
Yeah.
SteerUp allows retail investors to actually co-invest alongside experienced lead investors
Okay.
who pick a selection of promising startups.
So you're kind of,
Yeah, so it's
Being-
like learning from them.
yeah, you have a seasoned guide
Okay.
in this world that can be kind of intimidating
Yeah.
for a newcomer.
That's great. So instead of trying to compete
Exactly.
with these experienced investors, you're learning from them
You're learning. Exactly.
and benefiting from their expertise.
It's a win-win. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds really cool.
The retail investors get access to these high-growth companies that they wouldn't normally be able to invest in.
Yeah.
And the lead investors.
They get to expand their reach and attract more capital for their startups.
That's great.
It's a good model.
Yeah, this all sounds really promising. But,
Yeah.
the CFA Institute article also had some warnings
Right.
about private markets.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that investors need to be cautious about?
That's a great point because private markets do have some intriguing advantages.
Yeah.
They also come with their own risks, right?
Okay.
So for one thing, they're less liquid than public markets.
Okay.
When you invest in a private company, you're typically locked in for a longer period of time.
Okay.
You can't just sell your shares like you can.
On a whim.
Yeah, on a whim like you can with publicly traded stock.
So patience is key.
Patience is key, absolutely.
Okay.
And you also have to remember that not every private company is going to be a home run.
Right.
In fact, many startups fail.
Yeah, of course.
So that's why diversification is so crucial,
Yeah.
even within the private market. It's important to spread your investments across companies and industries
Gotcha.
just to mitigate your risk.
Okay, so there's a lot to consider here.
There is.
We've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah.
But I want to dig a little deeper into this idea of risk and reward.
Sure.
And, I know you're really good at connecting the dots
Well, thank you.
and helping people see the bigger picture.
I appreciate that.
So as we're talking, what stands out to you? What questions do you have about risk and reward in private markets?
Well, for me, I think the biggest question is
Yeah.
how do you weigh that potential for higher returns
Yeah.
against the risk
Yeah.
of investing in something that's not publicly traded and might take years to see a payoff?
Right. It's like
That's a tough question.
choosing between a guaranteed but modest return
Uh-huh.
and a chance at winning the lottery, right?
Yeah,
Except the lottery ticket is tied up for years before you even know if you've won or not.
that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And it really highlights why the CFA Institute's emphasis on education is so important.
Yeah.
If more people are going to have access to these types of investments,
Yeah.
they need to understand that private markets, it's a whole different ballgame
Mhm.
than the stock market.
It's not for the faint of heart.
It's not just picking a hot stock and hoping for the best.
Right.
It takes patience, research, and a tolerance for uncertainty.
Definitely.
You're sure?
The article also talks about how the structure of private markets can actually reduce some of the risk that we see in public markets.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Absolutely. One of the key differences is that private markets are not subject to the same daily volatility as public markets.
Okay.
Because shares of private companies aren't constantly being traded.
Yeah.
Their value isn't as influenced by short-term news
Right.
or market sentiment.
It's more stable.
It creates this more stable environment for long-term growth.
Yeah. So it's less about
It's less about the hype.
the hype and speculation.
Yeah. And more about informed decisions based on how the business is actually doing.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's where
And that's where SteerUp comes in.
platforms like SteerUp can play a really important role
Okay.
by giving you access to these curated selections of startups
Yeah.
that are evaluated by experienced investors.
Okay.
They can help retail investors navigate this world,
That's great.
make more informed choices.
It's like having a team of experts.
Yeah, it's like
Do due diligence.
doing the due diligence for you.
Okay. But that also raises the question of trust.
It-
How can investors be sure
Right.
that these lead investors are really acting in their best interests?
That's a valid concern, and it highlights the importance of transparency and accountability.
Okay.
Like these platforms, SteerUp, they need to be clear about how they select their lead investors,
Okay.
what their track records are, how they're incentivized.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Investors should also do their own research
Yeah.
on the lead investors and their philosophies.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure it aligns with their own goals
Yeah, it's like
and risk tolerance.
choosing a financial advisor.
Exactly.
You want to make sure that you're working with somebody who understands your needs
Yeah,
and has a good track record.
exactly.
Yeah.
And just like with any investment, diversification is key.
Yeah,
Even if you trust those lead investors,
right.
you should spread your investments across different startups.
Okay.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes me think back to that point that the CFA Institute made about the benefits for the average investor.
Yeah.
If it's done thoughtfully,
Yeah.
it could be a way to build wealth
Yeah.
over the long term
Yeah.
without having to be constantly glued to the stock ticker
Exactly.
and stressing out about every fluctuation in the market.
That's right.
Yeah. It just seems
Yeah.
like a more stable way to...
A more kind of like steady approach.
Yeah, I think that's a really good assessment. Yeah. But it's important to remember that private markets, they're
Yes.
just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
They're not a magic bullet,
Right.
right? They're not a replacement.
You can't just show.
For stocks and bonds, it should all work together.
So it's all about balance.
It's about balance, yeah.
And finding the right mix for you.
Exactly.
Right.
And it's an ongoing process. Your investment strategy should evolve
Yeah.
as your circumstances change.
For sure. Always be learning and adapting.
Always be learning.
That's the key takeaway.
Yeah.
That's
sure.
Something else that they said in the article that really resonated with me was they said that the traditional barriers to entry in private markets have actually created a self-fulfilling prophecy when it comes to risk perception.
Oh, interesting.
Because these markets have been so secretive
Yeah.
and limited to a select few.
Right.
There's this lack of understanding
Exactly.
that breeds fear and skepticism.
Yeah, people are afraid of what they don't understand.
Exactly.
Exactly.
But they argue that by opening up access
Yeah.
and providing more information,
Right.
we can start to demystify these private markets.
Yes, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Knowledge is the antidote to fear. The more we understand how private markets work,
Yeah.
the better we'll be at assessing the risks and reward.
Exactly. And platforms like SteerUp, with their focus on transparency and investor education, have the potential to play a really important role in this process.
I agree. It's fascinating to think about
It is.
how technology is just changing the investment landscape,
Yeah.
creating all these opportunities.
A whole new world.
Yeah, that were unimaginable just a few years ago.
Yeah. But as with any innovation, there are challenges.
For sure.
Right.
You are.
And potential pitfalls.
Yeah, there are definitely pitfalls to avoid.
So what do you see as the biggest hurdles that these platforms are going to have to overcome?
I think one of the biggest challenges is going to be finding that balance between accessibility and investor protection.
Oh, making it.
It's great to make it more accessible,
Yeah.
but we have to make sure people understand the risks.
Right.
And that they're not making decisions.
But they'll regret.
Yeah, that they might regret later.
Yeah. So it's about...
It's about democratizing access.
Yes.
Without sacrificing due diligence.
Yeah.
And responsible investing.
So they have to
It's a tough one.
walk a tightrope.
It's a tough balance, yeah.
Yeah, and they're going to be walking that tightrope under the watchful eye of regulators
Oh, yeah.
who are still trying to figure out,
Right, they're still
figuring this all out.
oversee this whole thing.
It's a new landscape.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time to be following this.
It is.
We've got technology, we've got innovation, we've got all these evolving regulations.
That's right. It's all coming together.
Shaping the future of investing.
It really is. And it's not just about the individual investors either.
Oh, how so?
Well, opening up these private markets could have a huge impact on the whole economy.
How so?
Think about it. If you give startups access to capital that they wouldn't normally have,
Yeah.
these platforms like SteerUp
Right.
could really fuel innovation and entrepreneurship.
That's amazing.
It could give these small businesses a chance to grow and create jobs,
Yeah.
ultimately boosting the economy.
So it's like planting seeds.
It is. It's like
for a more dynamic economy.
Exactly. And it's not just about finding the next big unicorn company.
Right.
It's about helping all these different businesses grow.
From tech startups to local mom and pop shops.
Exactly.
So it's about democratizing opportunity.
It is, yeah.
On multiple levels.
On multiple levels.
For investors, for businesses.
That's right.
For the economy.
Yeah. It's an exciting vision.
It is.
But it's going to take work.
Yeah.
It's going to take a commitment to transparency and responsibility from everyone involved.
Well, I, for one, am excited to see how this all plays out.
Me too. It feels like we're at the beginning of
A major shift in how we think about investing.
Yeah.
How we participate in the economy.
Yeah, so for our listeners out there who might be interested in private market investing,
Yeah.
what's the key takeaway you want them to leave with?
I would say stay curious, do your research, and remember knowledge is power.
Yes.
The more you understand about private markets,
Yeah.
the better you'll be able to navigate this evolving landscape
And make good decisions.
and make good decisions that align with your goals.
Great advice. And if you're feeling curious and you want to learn more, check out the CFA Institute.
Yes.
Platforms like SteerUp are out there to help you.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of private markets.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, keep learning, keep investing wisely, and keep diving deep.